What's up, everybody? So anybody who knows me knows that I love the Nier game series. Started out playing Nier Automata. Then everybody started telling me, dude, you gotta play Replicant. It wasn't Replicant at the time, it was just Nier. And I've been playing that. I've been replaying that, actually. And actually, I got Drakengard 3 from eBay just recently, so that's on my to-do list. But anyways, anybody who's also been following along knows that I've been putting out a lot of cozy shorts where I've been making tools and other little inspired things from video games and whatnot that have just been reusing old saw blades, old broken saw blades. And having the belt sander really helps out. But I thought that I could do a Fang of the Twin build using pieces from the old saw blade, and that's what this build is going to be about. It's kind of like a skill builder that I've been doing in past years. We're like, hey, this is a new year. This is where I'm at in terms of my skill set and problem solving set. So let's go ahead and get into that build right now. So all you do is, you just snap your piece off of the saw blade with brute strength, just like I did, no big deal. And then you compare it to your first one. I mean, honestly, no, it's not that easy. You just use an angle grinder. And then deburr, I just got this deburring tool, which is kind of neat. So I just use that to get the raw edges off, just to make sure that I'm not gonna snag myself. And then we're gonna go over to the belt sander. So this guy is really dope, and if you wanna check out my video, I'd really appreciate it. I just put it out a couple weeks ago, so. But this guy, we're just gonna, make sure that we clean up all the edges and make sure that it stays cool. That's why you wanna make sure that you have a little piece of water that you can dump it into every now and then. And we just wanna make sure that all the edges are really nice and smooth so that we can go on to the next piece and duplicate it. Now that I have the first one already ground up and it's really showing through, I needed an exact duplicate for the second one. I didn't want them to deviate to where it was noticeable that, oh, this is piece A, this is piece B. I wanted it to be like if I dropped them on the workbench where it's like, well, which one is the top, which one is the bottom? So I used a scribe line with this little fella right here. This is just a scribing tool, and now that the first one is done, I just literally traced it over as close as I could get with this little guy. And one thing that's kind of neat that I didn't realize about the scribe line is that it just kind of fades away as you're using the belt grinder. So here's my scribe line here. You can kind of see it at the top, right? And as you're pushing and, making sure that you're being safe about everything and keeping your stuff cool and steamy, that whenever you approach the line, you can see like right towards in the middle, it's starting to go away. It just kind of fades away, which is a great telltale sign that tells you that you're almost done and that way you don't overshoot or anything. So it's super handy, and I didn't realize that was even a thing. So now that we've hit right up against that scribe line, I want to make sure that everything is nice and smooth for those edges to make it like pretty mirror shiny, which is kind of cool. I really love using this tool. It's a great thing to have. But we're going to go ahead and do that, make sure both of them look real nice and that they're duplicated, just like I mentioned before, right? We want to make sure that they're both interchangeable. And it's looking real good so far. But the other thing we want to make sure that is that we take care of those faces. The edges look great, but faces could use a little bit of work. They're a little gummed up. And they look like teeth, Dracula teeth. But the way that I'm going to do that is that I just took this neodymium magnet out of a hard drive, and since it has the little wings, for lack of a better phrase, it makes it real easy to keep my fingers away from the death bits of the belt sander, so that I can work on it and make sure that everything's nice and shiny. You just got to make sure that you're ready for the pull, because it's going to pull away from you, especially not being right up against the bed. But now that we have both of them, they all look real good, and now we can start moving on to the next phase of operation. And you can kind of see right here, right? They're going to be situated as such. Stacked. I have this rod right here. This is a cold roll steel rod. And I kind of want to get out of my comfort zone and weld the pieces. But I also need that little pokey bit, the little pikey bit. So I'm just going to take a spare round object. This is just a tin can. And with the rest of the saw blade that I have at my disposal, I'm just going to mark a little line. And then kind of see, make sure that everything looks like it's supposed to. Boom. Cut it out with the angle grinder. There we go. Clean it up on the belt sander as well. And with a little movie magic, everything looks shiny. Everything is nice and shiny, just like that. So this next part right here, I wanted to make sure that there was a little spot for me to try to weld the little pokey bit and the axe heads onto. Not realizing, going the full length of the bar and sanding it flat, that the edge of my axe head was 1 inch, and so is the belt sander sanding pad. So, oopsie. Now that the rod and the pieces parts are all looking real nice and shiny, it's time to physically put them onto the rod itself. And I was kind of debating back and forth like whether or not I wanted to use the steel rod, because that was sort of push me out of my comfort zone to where I was like thinking I should probably try to weld it. And then I was like, well, how am I going to get this tool steel type of, or high-speed steel, whatever. I mean, somebody's going to yell at the screen at this point. Whatever a saw blade is, I'm sure it's not cold-rolled steel like what I'm using for the rod. But those are two dissimilar metals in regards to their composition. And so looking around on the interweb, I was like, look, if I'm going to weld these, and an amateur welder, I would say, is putting it pretty complimentary at this point. I've welded at tech shop, but I am by no means a welder by trade, or in DIY, even a beginner, I would say. But what the interweb was telling me is that if I take the piece of tool steel and heat it up as much as I can, and then it would help to take the weld when putting it on the cold rolled steel whenever I go to apply the spark. So I was just going to tack it into place, and didn't go exactly as I thought it was going to. It looks great on paper, but putting the proof to practice, So right here, I'm just trying to use my blowtorch, and I'm trying to get this thing as hot as I can, but I don't want to make it like cherry red or even semi. I don't know, man. I'm just winging it at this point. I'm going to be honest. So as I got it hot, I'm trying to tack it onto that little grounded flat piece that I had, and I figured, well, if I have some magnets to keep them in place, I use some spare neodymiums, and then we'll figure it out. Well, that didn't work. So since that piece fell off almost immediately, with that failure behind me, I figured, well, let's try something else. Instead of welding the two pieces of metal together, maybe I can use their dissimilarities in order to press fit them into place. And so what I was thinking is that if I carve a little slot with my angle grinder, just big enough for that little pikey, stabby, pokey piece to go into, then I could sort of press fit it into place. But I didn't want it to wobble, and my intention was not to use epoxy, but spoiler alert, I'm gonna maybe use epoxy later, is that if I could expand the slot and contract the actual pikey piece, as they cool down, they will fuse together. And so this is this next attempt. So it's not the prettiest thing right now, but we'll take that as a win. So with the expansion and contraction part somewhat behind me, I figured let's go ahead and move on to the next bit. And recently I put out a short where I made some copper bracelets that I'm going to batch out for Christmas gifts later. I figured while I'm experimenting, why not try to make like a little slot for the axe head to press fit into using copper. And so I had some pretty promising results. And looking at the actual Nier photo of the Fang of the Twin weapon anyways, it looks like it has like a little accent piece. And so I figured, well, I could do like a little key slot for it to slide into, and then I can just kind of use my engraving tool that I also made a short about from using saw blade pieces that actually kind of put out some promising results. And so even just kind of messing around, I was like, well, let's go ahead and move forward with this. And then that way it can, again, build skills with using copper and also doing the metal working piece, and then just kind of bring everything together. And quite literally, because this is my experiment right here where I was just like, you know what? I'm going to use my little texture hammer on the triangular, you know, really sharp edge piece to try to pound it into submission. And it actually works out pretty well. Like even just messing around, like it doesn't move a lot, which is very promising and actually very confidence building. And so I was like, okay, well, this is cool. And I just did this with some scraps, but let's see if we can actually make it look more like the actual Nier Fang of the Twin axe head with the accent forge welded blacksmith piece or whatever. So with that being said, I took my quintessential 1940s housewife defense kit, purse and iron with a little boost. Oh yeah, no, it's literally just sand. So we'll get it, you know, we'll get the get the knots out, put our iron on there just to make sure that we have a nice flat surface, complete with less recoil and sound dampening because pounding metal really wears on the ears. But I have my pieces that I'm going to replicate. No pun intended. Well, no, my puns are always intended. So I'm going to replicate those little accent pieces that we talked about earlier. And I want to make it look like this. This is the inspiration, right? So I figured with that being said, I'll go ahead and draw the little divot pieces, or I'm not sure what you would call those little rounded off bits, but where the handle would meet the blade, I want to round those pieces off. And then of course, I just want to kind of draw out where it would come out to a point. And then just, at this point, I'm just sketching to as close as I can without actually just copying it, like copy and pasting it basically. And so I want to put my own spin on it, and I want to use my own tools and just, make it my own. That's the whole point of this build, right? This is the inspo, this is the inspiration. And so we'll just kind of figure out how it's going to look. So here's my rough sketch, and it's by no means symmetrical or very artistic, but you know what? We're going to make it work. And so here is the piece, and this is freshly annealed. And so I wanted it to be soft so that I can get these two pieces to mirror each other, right? I want this keyway to be, I don't want it to skew the blade to where it's off center or it's twisted. And so annealing it really helps soften that metal so that you can literally just do it with your hands. But just remember that whenever you work harden it, you're gonna need to blast it with the furnace again just to make sure that you get it nice and soft and anneal it once more. So with that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and make sure that we establish that symmetry. I take my calipers and take the full length divided by 2 so that I can get my scribe line for the center line that we saw was severely not pointy. But you know what? This is why we learn, man. We do the things we do to see the errors of our ways. See, terribly off, but that's okay. We're gonna make it work, and then I'll just cut those into position into nice pointy bits so that we can establish that symmetry for later on. So now that I have a rough idea as to what I want to do as far as that little brace piece and what the design is going to look like, I want to take out those rounded edges where the actual rod brace meets the axe head. And so I thought I would just use my Dremel or my fake Dremel, my Femel that I got. And I was like, you know what? I have something that I've already modified in an earlier video that actually could help this go a little bit faster. Especially since the Femel has like the horsepower of like a disturbed goat or something. So I go ahead and pull out my fake sewing machine die filer that I got from an auction site for like $4 and put that bad boy to work because it was way more efficient and it was way faster than what I would want to do, trying to hand file it or hand cramping with the Femel. So, and I apologize for the overhead shot. I got a little bit wobbly, so I'll spare you the intensity, but we got it real nice and rounded off. So that's a plus. And so now it's time to go into the engraving section. And so I was like, you know what? This is the part that I was like pretty excited about to try to get back into this kind of thing. And the engraver tool is cool. I mean, it just fits in the hand, and then using the Baron as the ferrule or whatever. I just really like how this came together. And I mean, it's a DIY project, but watching Yuri Tushman, I'm sorry if I butchered your name, but seeing that, I'm like, you know what? This is pretty cool. I can do this. So, start with a confidence builder and, you do a straight line and it's actually pulling the copper away and carving and engraving. And you're like, that's kind of cool. And then you realize whenever you're trying to do angled pieces that you overshoot. And then you're like, yeah, you know what? Take the one win. And, people do this for a living. So it's not like you can just dive head first. So then I start punching the tip. And yeah, the tip of the brace. And so I'm starting to do this, and then I start doing the curvy bits when, well, that's gonna look like a puppy dog. It's gonna be so weird. Okay, hold on. Let me rethink this. So I didn't want this thing to look really cartoony, especially not a dog. So my problem solving veered me into the texturizing hammer. This way I get the best of both worlds. I got the texture and the engraving. It's all personal to my stuff and my tools. And so now we're getting ready for assemble. Assemble! I couldn't help myself. I couldn't help it. All right, but me and my movie quotes. I love it. I love it. But anyways, the assembly is ready to rock. So I got the little pikey bit on top, and like I said, spoiler alert, right? I had to use epoxy. I used a little bit of epoxy to keep that thing settled. And so whenever I have my brace bits, I'm just trying to get it all parallel and in line with each other. I didn't want anything to be twisted or skewed because that would just kind of defeat the purpose. And I didn't want this bad boy falling over, so I had to reposition my sandbag.
You feel it, and it feels like a bag of sand when you're touching it.
Bag of sand?
So the sandbag, not only does it help position things whenever you're working and keeping things from falling over and making you really angry whenever they come mispositioned, but it also helps, like I said, dampen sound and recoil whenever you're pounding metal. But now that these things are finally coming together and the excitement is building that we're almost done, I had to stick a little copper sliver in the back of the bottom piece just to keep it braced and from slipping and sliding. And so that's what I'm doing right here, while also trying to keep the pieces parallel, or in line, I should say, like this.
All right, and here we go. We've allowed the epoxy to dry. Everything is nice and secure. It's not gonna fling out, right, whenever you swing it, or if you play with it and smack somebody in the eye, so that's good. And we're just gonna go ahead and give this to our Nier stubby friend. Why not? Because why doesn't a robot need Fang and the twins? All right, I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.